the general talk of the paper is that some of the sections, while it is expected as usual, verbal section was a little challenging. When it came to the RCs, the options were very close and kind of stuff. What we are going to do is I'm going to wait for a couple of minutes. We'll begin in a couple of minutes. Arks and GP and Shivku will also be joining us today. In the meanwhile, why don't you go ahead and tell what your feeling is about the paper in the comments here?
Hi.
Hi, Alex.
Quant was not easy. Quant was easy. Okay, there are two contrasting sentences in one, two sentences itself, two people itself. How was the exam is what Abhinit asking. Sir, when will XAT release response sheet? Khyati said. Hopefully in the next couple of days, Khyati. Before we begin, I thought I will just take a few bits of feedback from each one of you. Gautam Bhaiya says moderate level. Okay. DM questions were tricky. Aditi Agarwala. Okay. QA was easy. Quant was easy, but VARC was tougher than last year.
Janvi, you have already counted your score in Quant? DI wasted a lot of time. Interesting. Okay.
That's fantastic. Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and look at what we believe will be the cutoffs. What was this paper all about, so that you can assess too what exactly you can get and look at whether XLRI, BM, or HRM is possible for each one of you. We will come back to that, Shubhradeep. Ravi, go ahead. It was enough to remove the tension relating to the CAT results. Ashish Baguna, I agree with you.
So, just a second. Yeah. Is the PPT visible, sir?
Not yet. Yeah, now it is.
Yeah. So, that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very warm welcome to this very special session. So XAT is the way I look at it. XAT is one of my favorite papers to write because XAT does not tell me what to do at what time, because it doesn't say you get only 40 minutes for verbal ability, you get only 40 minutes for DI kind of stuff. That kind of bullshit is not there in XAT, though there was one passage which was absolute bullshit, and the topic itself was bullshit, and I actually liked the kind of passages that were there in the paper. What is your overall take on the paper, Arks?
If I look at the overall paper and I compare it with the last year or the year before last, especially last year, not year before last, I think the verbal RC was a little bit trickier, especially the RC part. The verbal was easy, but RC, as usual, is tricky. But quantitative ability, I felt, because there were a lot of easier questions in numbers. Of course, I am looking at saying that, okay, can people do numbers in the first place? That's going to be always a question mark. But if those students who are comfortable with basic mathematics would have found quantitative ability easy, and verbal ability a little more trickier than normal, not verbal, the reading comprehension more trickier than normal. The decision making, Ravi, has been very similar to what it was last year, according to me. They were easy sitters. Some of the questions where all the four choices could be eliminated, but there are questions where you can't eliminate a single question also.
Absolutely. In fact,
choice also like that. That's the way I look at it.
And decision making is generally that section which it is always like my word against yours. There will be certain kind of ambiguity even when you get your final answers, but yeah, you've got to go for the most rational of the answers and most analytical of the answers from the options that are available. So let's take a look at the overview. So overall, as Arks has already said, that BA was easy to moderate level. In fact, I would not even call it moderate. The options in questions of parajumbles, the fill in the blanks, the preposition based, grammar based questions were not very, very difficult to identify. So even out of the 26 questions, barring the 15 questions of some passive poems or stuff, poem and RC and stuff, even if one is very comfortable doing that critical reasoning and grammar part of it, the other 11 questions were easy to moderate level. Well, the RCs, the RCs were not a difficult read. There was not a lot of density in the passages as such. However, there was one passage which was completely only one paragraph that could have been a little difficult to read. Otherwise, the more VALR paper was also, the entire paper of VALR could be said that the entire section lies in the moderate level of difficulty, because the VA part was typically easier than what we have seen in the previous years for XAT, and the RC part was almost on the lines of what XAT has always been. However, the poems, to my surprise this year, were a little easier to interpret than what it used to be, the general picture. So we say that the good score in VALR, mind you, this good score is not the cutoff. Okay, this is not cutoff. Good score, a good student should be very easily, comfortably able to put at least 10 to 12 correct answers in the paper and leave it there. Coming to the decision making section, yes, there were a couple of sets which were highly ambiguous. That the decision that one could make, that the options, the choices were very, very close. Hence, a couple of sets which were a little difficult. We'll discuss about each of the sets in a little depth in a moment. However, if you look at the overall paper, it seemed to be similar to what happened last year. So similar to last year, the overall moderate level of difficulty for decision making, and 10 plus is going to be a very good score in decision making here. Similarly, quantitative ability and data interpretation, one major setback, if I may call it, is no lack of arithmetic in the paper. There were hardly 2 to 3 questions of arithmetic in the paper, and the paper was numbers heavy. Now, anyone who is comfortable with numbers and a little bit of algebra would have easily sailed through all of those questions, and that is why we feel that 15 plus was a possible score in this QADI section, and it is going to be a good score above 15 in this QADI section. So overall in this paper, anyone who gets a 35 plus is what our judgment is as of now, that 35 plus should be a very safe and good score in the paper. Mind you, these are not cutoffs. Cutoffs will come towards it in the very fat end. So coming to the VALR section, Aks, would you want to discuss
Yeah,
this?
I'll just go to with that.
Yeah.
Like Ravi has said correctly, there were 11 questions of verbal ability, friends, of which two of them were fill in the blanks. My bet was both the questions were very straightforward and easy. Two parajumbles, incidentally, both the parajumbles. In fact, if one of the parajumbles had come in cat, you would have got it completely right also. And with the choices, it becomes much more easier. Interestingly, even the three grammar questions by elimination method, you could have got it very quickly also. So 3 plus 2 plus 2, that is 7. And the 4 questions were on logical reasoning or critical reasoning. Somebody was asking, what is LR? Swapnil Bharadwaj. LR in VALR is the logical reasoning or critical reasoning part. And I suspect all the 4 may say, even if you of course attempt 4, you should be able to get about 2 correct or even 3 correct more often than not. I mean, for a decent good student. That means out of 11 questions in verbal ability, if you attempt all 11 and get about even 8 right or 7 right, you are talking about getting a 7, 6.5, 7 marks for sure there. It could be more for a slightly better verbal student. But when it comes to RCs, there were 4 questions. For some reason, in fact, Ravi and I were thinking when we were driving back from our exam venue that they were taking on the IIMs, it looks like stupidity, conformism, even the essay that you remember about what management students are looking for, management institutes are looking at, stellar academic records rather than looking at whether they're good for management or not. That I think is very interesting. All the 4, stupidity, the question on stupidity, the question on bullshit and liar. In fact, Ravi was saying, oh, I never knew there was a difference between liars and bullshit. And of course, conformism and psychological rich savage XLRI. I agree with you, Sarthak Arora. So, but to be honest, out of all the 4 RCs, you could have easily attempted 2 RCs, maybe 3 also. And Even if you leave one odd question in between, I think about attempting 7 to 8 questions in there and getting about 4 or 5 correct is very much possible. Whatever might we say about the poem or the questions under the two poems that were given, we are sure till the result comes out, or till the answer comes out, we can only think that okay, it looks like easy questions kind of thing. But overall, where we are coming down to is simple. You talk about 6 to 7 marks out of the 11 in verbal ability. You talk about around 4 or 5 out of the 12, 13 questions in RC and poems put together will get you into that 11, 12 bracket. Our bet is at around 9 marks, you will get a 80 percentile at a 9 marks, and maybe around 9.5, 10, you will easily get that 85 plus percentile, which is required for business management cutoff for XLRI.
Absolutely.
That's
In
what
fact, the only reason why I wrote only two questions doable out of the three questions of grammar, though myself I don't have a strength in grammar as such. The only reason why I wrote two out of three here it was because in one of the questions they had asked you to find out what is the correct sequence, which is the correct usage, and a couple of questions was incorrect usage. So anyone who read the question wrong would have made a mistake. Otherwise, from the options it was very easy to eliminate and one could easily get all three. However, at least two is what I'm guessing one could get out of the grammar question. So out of the VA verbal ability, 7 to 8 questions getting this correct was not very difficult in this paper.
absolutely.
Coming to
Decision making, however, was anybody's guess. There were
absolutely
7 sets of 3 questions each. Those of you who have written it, you will know this. Except for a few questions, I'm not even talking about sets, because reading the sets, understanding the problem is not a big deal. But how do you deal with some of these questions? Like the professor and the two girls copying for that assignment. Where will the uh, exact what will be the correct answer be? Not assignment submission, that is the first one we're talking about, or the future leader school question or the set, or even the doctor's SUV. While it is a little more easier than others, dosa set out of three, maybe two questions were easy. But as I think we all of you are also putting up on the chat window, I think it is definitely trickier. What we believe, and Ravi, you can add more to this, is that it is a typical decision making of XLRI and XAT, and therefore, typically around 7 marks. We have seen this for a very long time, that about 33%, that is 7 out of 21, should give you the cutoff that is required. 7.5 would give you a cutoff required.
absolutely,
Ravi?
sir. In fact, I am in complete agreement with whatever you said about decision making. Though the couple of the easy ones I felt was one that was the dosa one, and one that was the doctor SUV one, which was very easy to understand and easy to eliminate options as well. However, there were some questions of decision making where I felt that it was going in continuum, like the data for question one was useful data for question two. However, nowhere in the instructions had they mentioned that you can carry forward data. So that was my only pain when it came to one of the questions in the dosa set and one of the questions in the research associate wala set, also the professor in which the one in which the professor was not doing enough research. I At the end I felt like बहुत हो गया निकाल दो. But I don't know whether it is the correct rational decision to take at that point in time. So out of the 21 questions, I felt there were 11 to 12 questions that I could mark. One could mark very confidently. Even if you get like 10 correct and 2 wrong, one should end up at a score of 8 plus, 9 plus. And anything that is above 8 plus should definitely probably clear the cutoff for this particular section for both XLRI, HRM, and BM.
See, one of the things, Ravi, before we go to Quant,
Hmm.
about decision making, gentlemen and ladies, all of you are listening to us. The problem with decision making is it's not so difficult to read and difficult to understand the questions. But some questions, some choices at least, You don't agree with any of the five choices. And in some cases, two choices are so close. I think then somebody are talking about the ethics questions. Yeah, there is a heavy ethics element in XLRI's papers. So, how do you deal with this? And your answer is as good as mine. Is that kind of a thing? It's a very, very subjective thing. Absolutely correct, Shubham Kumar. It's very, very subjective. And hence, it is hazardous to guess that this is correct or that is correct. Okay, so in that sense of the word, what I would say is, uh, going by tradition, going by empirical evidence over the last so many years, I think 7 marks would be a very, very decent mark to get and clear the cutoff. Now somebody might get 14 correct and 7 wrong, or 13 correct and 8 wrong, kind of things, if you have done all 21, and that is the person who will get more than 8, 10, 10 marks kind of.
Right. In fact, the benchmark for decision making that we have seen overall through the last 3 4 years in terms of percentiles is that percentile is just percentage into two when it comes to the decision making section.
Right. And we'll now next come to Quant. Don't worry, Shubham. We'll come to Quant very quickly. Omkar
Yeah.
is asking one question, which what will prevent the person the most from opening stall in the mall has shitty options. I'll agree.
Yeah, there were four options which were supportive and only one option which was negative. I
It was
don't think
easy.
that even
Actually, the question
qualifies
was
as a
easy.
question. Absolutely, that had absolutely shitty options. I'll agree
The
to that.
important thing about decision making, I'm dwelling too much on this, but I just take another half a minute on this, is instead of looking at the passage, I think you should be careful about the question what is asked. I think whose perspective the question is asked in is very, very important. And I think that is when you kind of take decisions. And Nikhil, don't worry if you have done 20. My bet is most of them would have done more than 17, 18 questions. The reason is very simple. It is not difficult to mark a answer. You don't know whether it is correct or wrong. But I would say what? Just relax, wait for the keys to come out. But my bet is even if you get 10 correct and 11 wrong, you will still clear the cutoff with 7 plus. That is somewhere gives every one of you, I'm pretty sure, some hope. A research cut, of course. Yeah, Nishra, I agree with you. Yeah, Ravi, let's go to the quant part, which I'm sure you have cracked it.
Yeah, so I was when I was looking going through quant, I was searching for questions ki arithmetic de bhai, where is ratios, where is averages, nothing in that. But yeah, basically there were two questions of arithmetic. One was a profit loss and discount question, very classic question, and one which was uh, there was no compound interest, there was no emi, no stuff like that, only two questions of arithmetic, out of which one was very easily doable. One I think you would like require to put some effort and you'll probably get it very easily again. The problem with the paper I felt was, see, I did not feel, my perspective was not that quantitative ability was a difficult section in this paper, but the only fear I have is that numbers is an area which quite a lot of people neglect when it comes to the preparation for cat. While out of the 28 questions, one fourth of the paper of qa and di in zat was questions based on your numbers and your understanding of numbers, though couple of them were very common kind of questions, one on lcm, one on hcf, that I think most of you could have figured out what the answers would be. Otherwise, the paper being numbers heavy was the only sad part about the paper. How, but the questions of numbers also, having said that, were not difficult at all. So anyone who could pull off these 4 to 5 questions out of this 7, I think will end up doing 16 to 18 questions in the paper, because unlike expected, unlike what was expected out of zat, the di questions were the di questions of especially the college admissions and the one that had stock prices, these two di sets at least did not have a lot of calculation to do. However, there was a little bit of logic to crack in the college admissions wala set. I think the only di set which would have challenged a lot of us would have been the figuring out the correct answer out of the 7 people who had after the 5 people who had answered 10 questions, figuring out who gave the correct answer to what question. That is
In-
probably the only difficult DI set or a challenging DI set among the four DI sets that existed in the paper. For
Incidentally,
those of you
Ravi,
who
there
are
was one question which was an exact same question, repeat of what Snap guys gave, except that it's 3 meters instead of 3,000 meters.
correct. So in algebra, one geometric progression question in which the height was 3 meters instead of 30 meters of what it was given in Snap is an exact replica. In fact, all the four questions of algebra that were there in the paper, one on arithmetic progression, one on geometric progression, one on the domain of f of x, all the four questions of algebra, one including the simple equations, were very easily doable questions. So that is what my
Jupiter is
gut
also there
feeling
now.
is. 16 to
GP,
18.
sorry. Continue, Ravi.
Yeah, so solving 16 to 18 questions in this paper confidently would not have been a lot of issue. As I said, these four questions, the last four questions, are the only ones that I felt could be challenging and dicey in the paper. Otherwise, anyone who is comfortable with numbers could have actually sailed off very easily in this section. GP, your take?
Yeah, Ravi, I would my take is slightly different. I joined in late, so maybe I missed the context just me.
Yeah,
But I thought 16 to 18 would be a good attempt for a good student.
correct.
Someone who's okay, then it is perfectly fine because I felt an average student will possibly struggle to go beyond 13 questions. Okay, and beyond that, it is going to be a challenge for them. However, what you talked about quant, I think quant was fairly easy, and that question, that snap question you're saying, there were at least 4 5 questions where you could just look at the choices and say what is the answer. In that question, there was a choice called 24 and 27, and that is the only choice which was a pair of choices which had a difference of three.
Which had a
Okay,
difference of three, obviously. Yeah,
and that had to be the answer. 27 had to be the answer.
correct.
Similarly, there were a couple of other questions in which I think, what was that? I think it was a time and work question, 2800 or 20 or something like that. Yeah, there
2400
also, yes,
is 48
yeah, so
into 50.
yeah,
50 into
yeah.
48 becomes 40 into
40
60.
into
No, no.
60.
Yeah,
So,
so
so
I did not go that
355.
far. My starting point here was both the numbers should be factors of 2400. And if you
Absolutely.
look at the choices, there were two factors of for two factors which you could check. And again, the standard format of simple numbers worked here. And I think there were about 6 questions which could comfortably be done just using the choices. And if you do those 6 questions using the choices, then you have sufficient time to go to 16, 17 questions, even if you're average student. If you're a good student, then 16, 18, I will agree with you, is not going to be a challenge at all. Okay? But yes, overall, it was a slightly different paper from the earlier ones with a larger number of questions of algebra. Sorry, the larger number of questions of number system, and those questions. Actually, couple of those questions are very simple, basic LCM HCF concept to be applied. So
Correct.
so 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 I would say anyone should do about 8 questions of QA definitely, and at least one set of DI definitely. So 11 to 12, I think, is something which everyone should be doing at least. Okay. So 8 plus 3 or 9 plus 3 is what I would typically look at. And when I'm saying 3, obviously I'm meaning at least one set of DI to be done. Okay.
Right.
Absolutely. Another question on -3 for that APGP, sorry, both the APs GP. That
Yeah.
question which was there, X,
Yeah.
Yeah.
A1, A2, Y, and Z, B, Y1, B1, B2, Z, X kind of things.
X,
I think lots of easy questions were there if you look at it. Arithmetic, at least one. Numbers, 3 4 questions were easy. Geometry, at least one was easy. And even algebra, I think a couple of questions were easy in that sense of the word. My belief is that 8 9 marks for a HR cutoff. I'm talking about the XLRI's HR cutoff will be around 7.5 to 8 at least. But for the BM cutoff, which has always been 90 percentile close to, will go to something like 10 10.5 also, is my feeling on this GP.
yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, Ox. End of the day, when we look at this particular paper, when we look at this particular paper, um, uh, I would say, given that it has a larger number of questions of numbers, and we had a couple of log kind of questions, and DILR, I would say, was not as easy as it used to be. I would believe it is slightly lower than last year. And for an HR program, 8, I think, will be very, very safe number to look at. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes below 8. 7, 7.5 also is a feasibility out there.
So Has, that is 21414.
Yeah, one answer is 21414. I felt very happy after that question.
That A minus B question, circumference and all. But again, like GP sir is saying, one of the very interesting things GP sir has said just now, if you listen correctly, is unlike the normal XAT papers where the DI is normally a straightforward DI, the broken pencils was your frequency distribution, a little bit of logic in that. College admissions was also logic. Stock prices also was partially logic but not completely, and the correct answers Q1 to Q10 was completely logic. In that sense, it was a very logic heavy paper, GP, and not everybody would have solved it very easily or that
Yeah.
comfortably. In that sense, I mean, probably you're right about it. I might revise that. Last year it was almost 10.5 or 11. It can come to 10 or 10.25 kind of things for the BM
Yeah.
levels.
Yeah.
In fact,
I think that,
if you look at
yeah.
the four DI sets that were there, I think in each of the sets there were at least one or two questions that could have been solved and one question which could have been left totally.
Mm, mm, mm.
Right. So
Actually,
let's go
stock prices
into,
was the only easy set. Actually, stock prices was the only easy set as long as
yeah.
you understood what the graph was saying, because it was basic calculation involved and no logic involved. All the remaining three sets, there was a requirement of understanding the logic.
Right. So overall, this is what uh, our overall expected cutoffs and overall image of the paper is. Any changes to make to this ARCs and GP?
No, no. I think what will happen, Ravi, is that okay. Just to quickly summarize this for verbal ability and LR section, as we call it, including RC, 9+ or 9.5 will be for your BM, and probably 8.5 will be for your HR. Similarly, DM, I think somewhere around 7 for both, or 7.5 will be for both. QADI, like GP is saying, 10 will be for the BM, but it could be as low as 7.5 or 8 for the HR, for the
Program.
HRM, the HRM area. That is what I look at it. But overall, since VARC might just go up by a little bit and a QA DI might come down with a little bit, what we believe is that this year also XLRI will have the XLRI engineer male will have a cutoff between the 32-33 mark, and an engineer female will have 2-3 marks less than that, and a non-engineer male will be similar to the engineering male with the same 29-30, whereas a non-engineering female can come as low as 27 as far as the cutoff is concerned. GP, if you can add, or Rahul also is there, if he can also add anything else.
No, I think actually you have covered it completely. There's nothing more for me to add.
Sure. The only thing, GP, which you missed out, one question lots of people are asking, and I wanted your opinion also on this, is decision making. While all 21 questions we felt were easy or straightforward, but there was lots of tricky choices.
Yeah.
So we said that it will be around 7 out of 21, which has been the similar thing. If you can just give your opinion also how it was according to you.
Yeah, I think the cutoff is going to be similar to last year. I don't see any specific change happening out here. Typically, 4-5 questions which are a little tricky, and the remaining are something which you can handle easily. I found that the first one, the assignment submission, that was a little tricky, especially what punishment to give, or how to copy, etc. Regarding the copying part, that was a bit tricky. Dosa was a little straightforward thing, but dosa wale mein issue yahi aata hai, and I've seen this earlier also. You have to match with the XLRE philosophy of business. Okay.
Correct.
Now, which is a very, very tricky thing. There aren't too many questions to say what is going to happen. If I remember correctly, a few years ago, we had a similar kind of data set, not exactly the same, similar in terms of context, where in Singapore, someone had a canteen and serving only Kannada food. Okay. So that again, the issue was, are you able to match with the XLRI business philosophy? Okay. Okay, so Doctor SUV again, yes, two are doable. One was a bit of a confusion kind of a thing, and fee payment. Actually, one of the question I was a little confused, reasonably well confused, I would say, regarding the sequence. Okay, the
Correct.
sequence was a bit of a issue out there more than anything else. Okay, but yes, overall a regular paper, and the cutoff should not change significantly from last year. So 6.5, 7 is what I would go with.
Fair
Aks, if I
enough.
can just put in a word or two here,
Sure, Rahul.
I think broadly, what we have tried to drill into all our students throughout our sessions is the strategy matters a lot for XAT. So we discussed that for verbal also, where the verbal side was easier. RC was, let's say, moderate to tough, and poems are absolutely crazy. So then, how do you prioritize? That makes sense. The same thing comes
I think we've lost him. Shivko, you would like to add? You also, I'm sorry, just saw that you are there. If you're speaking, we can't hear you because you are on mute. Ravi, I think we are missing.
Okay,
Continue.
okay. Well, let me just complete what I think Rahul is back. No.
No,
Okay,
you
let me
can
just
complete.
complete what Rahul was saying. I'll try it. I think I get the hang of what you're saying. Uh, us in all our session in the last 1 month, with respect to that, we have been clear about one thing. If you have to crack verbal, the VARC section, in verbal you should get at least 5-6 marks, and in RC you can get another 5-6 marks. And this year verbal was slightly easier. At least I felt it was easier. And my feeling is, out of those 11 questions, you can easily get 7, maybe 8 marks. Okay, 7 to 8
Correct.
correct answers are possible out there. So if students have focused on verbal, they would have found VLR easy. Same thing when we looked at the DILR, QADI part. There we are very clear, and there we were obviously assuming 9 questions of DI. Okay, that 19 out of the 9 questions of DI, look at doing 2 sets of data. Out of 19 questions of Quant, look at doing something like 8 to 10 questions. Okay, and same thing out here. So if you worked out your strategy right, you would not have a problem. I think Rahul is back.
No, I think we'll continue.
Okay,
Ravi?
Yeah.
Shivku is on mute. Kya?
नहीं नहीं अभी I hope can you
Yeah,
hear me?
Shivku, I can hear you now. We can hear you. Hmm.
Yeah. If I were to compare it with last year's paper, I thought that both VA and Quant section were slightly easier, right? DM, I'm never sure. वो Excel क्या answer देगा क्या है? But I think uh, uh, I believe that the quant cutoffs will be more or less similar, right? Probably a 1 mark here or there. VA, however, I think not that it can go off significantly, but uh, whether it is RCs, whether it is a non-RC part of this one, I think non-RC part this time was probably a lot more easier than what it was last year. That's my feeling.
Hmm.
So overall, I do agree with what we are saying here as a cutoffs.
Right. Ravi, let's quickly go to GK and SA and close that.
Yeah. So general knowledge section was, it was a fair balance between static GK and current affairs. And this year, I did not feel like ZAT is butchering me, at least in the general knowledge section. There were at least 8, 9, 10 questions that I could identify. Ki, हाँ, ये है. This is something I know. At least the match the following questions that were there this year, barring one question which was a little confusing. I think the other questions of match the following were very really there up for the grabs for all the students who could match it efficiently. I think even the static GK related to geography was not really difficult in this paper. So a good score would be anything. I think students could score anything about 10, and that should be a very good score in this general knowledge paper. Um, any additions, sir?
Ravi, for me, it was 9 definite answers,
Hmm.
9 pure guess, and 7 educated guesses. So that is my performance. And
Right.
unlike you, I found the match the following a little difficult, because I'm not. Most of those books I have never heard of. Okay, so
Actually easy, GP. If you knew even one or two, you
yeah,
would
that
get
I
the.
did. That I did. I would eliminate and did that. And there's another trick which I use. Look at, for example, the first number. The first alphabet has three twos. That means most likely it is going to be two. So those elimination I've done, and which is what I'm saying, educated guesses. Okay. So some places you would eliminate one option or two option based on that one thing, but some places you did not know. The movie ones was okay, for example. In
Yeah.
fact, one of that movie ones, K. Balachandran, and there was another South Indian director,
Right.
and there were two South Indian movies.
Correct.
Hanees, and there was one more. Which one was the Agantuk?
Adur
No, Agantuk was.
Adur Gopal Krishnan.
So K.
Elipatayam,
Balachandran.
Elipatayam.
Those two were very clearly South Indian movies, and that was sufficient to give me the answer. Okay. So Agantuk I knew was Satyajit Ray.
Yeah.
So those educated guesses kept on happening. But unlike IFT, where I find I'm able to do it out if there are 10 matches are falling, I'm typically able to do 7 or 8. Yeah, I would say in 10 I was on a 4 or 5. So to that extent, I found it a little more difficult.
Right. Going to the essay part of it, I think again XLRI has come out very strongly with one of the notions, and I think this is all of us wrote an essay on this only.
No, no. My neighbor was writing the essay on the first one.
First, okay.
I only wrote a couple of lines. I said, very good argument. I think I hope XLRI will follow this.
GP, I wrote a very simple 3-word answer. I agree with a smiley. Actually, I didn't have to do that. Thankful, I
This
didn't
is
have to write,
something.
thankfully.
This is
Unlike for
something
all of you.
everyone in the asks. This is something. The second topic is something everyone has been saying for years. That you
Absolutely.
cannot give so much of a veto power to academics, especially when you have multiple boards with multiple standards. This is such
Correct.
stupidity we have. All IIMs, Excel, FMS, all of them are falling to this stupid thing called marks.
True, true.
At
So
least
I think
I'm very happy that I did not see a word called jingoism in the paper.
I remember
I,
that jingoism word.
I think most of us,
no,
most of the students would not have had problems choosing the essay. Also, democracy and capitalism is something that you keep talking about in and out. And this academic records वाला तो अभी हमारे लाइफ में पिछले 2 महीने से यही चल रहा है. तो
My guess is most of the
ये academic jingoism है.
Ravi, my guess is most of the students would have gone for the second one.
yeah.
GP Tushar is saying, I am Indore should listen more to you, GP sir.
So Shah, IIMs don't listen to us. They have their own criteria. Kumar, competition is fine, but there has to be some balance. IIM Indore has made it that if you made a mistake or if you were sick during your 10th or 12th board exams, you can never join IIM Indore. That is being completely stupid. And I see the same issue with IIM Bangalore, my institute. And in my alumni meet, when we met the director, I told them exactly the same thing. IIM in Bangalore loses out on a large number of students who end up going to IIM Calcutta. Purely because they don't get the interview call, because IIM Bangalore says you have to be 90, 90, 80 in 10th, 12th graduation if you are, and this is general category. Obviously, for other category, it will be the similar thing. And even if in one of them you are less than 90, 90 or 80, then you don't have a chance in IIM Bangalore. That is being completely stupid. There can be multiple reasons there. I'll give you examples. Calcutta University does not give marks. The Calcutta University's representation in IIM Bangalore is now much lower than what it used to be earlier. Okay, but that is my rant. Let me stop here.
In fact, I think that is why there was a passage called stupidity in the paper today. Because they said, "तुम पुराने
That's absolutely right.
अभी मत निकालो."
Stupidity के साथ bullshit भी था.
Yeah.
Just put the
stupidity or
cutoff
bullshit
thing
दोनों
that
था.
you said. Just put up the cutoff thing that everybody is asking for. Yeah. Devang, this is the cutoff. Right?
I think
we'll.
Ravi वो DI वाला वो अपना mocks से almost
Yeah. Yeah. It was either in one of the earlier mocks, or I think it is CDC 2, CDC 3 types. एक mock था.
So
exactly.
that
Shivku, actually not too relevant for the students who have taken CAT and that this year, but for next year's students, for what this is telling me, DILR of CAT and the DILR of that is now the same. If you look at those 4 sets of data, they could easily have been in CAT also. Okay. So to that extent, from the point of view of a student who's going to take CAT 22 and next year, the idea should be that consider DILR to be the same for both of them. No difference between the two. Okay.
Do Jamshedpur residents have any advantage, any sort? If you get through, I think you can go home yeah,
For weekends.
every weekend.
You can get your clothes washed at home. You don't have to wash your clothes, and you can probably go home for food also. And then one disadvantage would be that your batchmates will pile on. Okay.
Ravi Surya, when will the response should be released? Hopefully in the next 2-3 days. Yeah.
Yeah, that is fairly let's say fast in this regard. I would
Yeah.
believe Tuesday or Wednesday it should be out. I'm surprised CAT last year released the answer key one day before that, na? The percentile or something.
Yeah. The scorecards were out one day before
Scorecards.
that. In fact,
Ah,
2019 also the same thing happened.
ये
oh,
कुछ
they missed it this time.
I was expecting it
RGB कहने
yesterday
से
evening.
बाद नहीं आया.
I was expecting it yesterday evening, but then I thought ये लोग
हाँ,
भी
maybe
सरकारी है.
maybe they didn't remember it.
हाँ, RGB कहना भूल गए इस बार.
CAT result, Sarthak is asking. I think it should have come yesterday. Since it didn't come yesterday, it will come tomorrow. Don't worry.
It will come this week for sure.
By the way, I was the one panelist who actually wrote the democracy and capitalism wala essay.
That's a fairly interesting topic, Rahul. However, I think what Ravi said is right. The second topic is something
Absolutely.
that
For
most of the
students, the
students are
second is
dealing
much
with.
more attractive.
No, not only attractive. This is
Absolutely. Much
something
more
you have
relevant,
more
and that's
data.
what they'll do.
Yeah, you have more data. You know what it is all about. You see it. You are experiencing it. But the first topic was definitely more interesting, more thought provoking.
In fact, about the first topic, they had given 3-4 sentences. उसी पे भी build कर सकते थे.
Rahul, you have a friend. Tushar also wrote Democracy and Capitalism.
Yes. So again, the issue really is, I felt that would be less emotional and not less personal, given that my own track record in 10th, 12th, and graduation is so bad.
Rahul, you are not the only one.
हाँ sir,
तो हम लोग को तो दिल
if
से
we
लेते हैं
actually
ना कि
wanted, हाँ, अगर हम लोग इस जनरेशन में थे तो शायद एडमिशन होता नहीं.
नहीं
कैट
नहीं
में जो भी
बिल्कुल
करो एडमिशन नहीं हुआ, काइंड ऑफ स्टफ.
बिल्कुल
राहुल ये जो सीएल का पहला स्टूडेंट था राहुल गोविंद राहुल
हाँ
गोविंद का जीबी
हाँ
कितना था 46% था ना ग्रेजुएशन
नहीं
में
नहीं 51% in graduation economics
54.
honors Hansard College
अच्छा,
51
right,
51%. So
right,
in 1997 or whatever, right, 95, he was lucky enough
right,
to be
right.
considered by IIM Bangalore, and today is a professor in a college in
Okay,
US. I mean, sorry, I think Australia.
right,
He teaches MBA
true,
students in Australia, right?
and
So
he had all calls
true.
Shipu. He
yeah.
did not convert A but he converted every other call and he had all IMs.
Mm.
Right.
Right. Chalo, that I think that's for it today, guys. I hope now that is over. The next one, those of you are writing for the snap, writing the snap. 8th, the second attempt is there on 8th, and 16th is the third attempt. However, I suspect this week, like Shivku sir is saying, maybe tomorrow, maybe day after, you will get the CAT results, and the interview calls for ABC and all will start coming by the end of the coming week, or maximum by 15th or 16th. So I think gear up for your PDP preparation very, very seriously. Don't wait for the call. It's a very silly thing to wait for the call and then suddenly have no time for it. I think you need to start your preparations absolutely seriously right away. That's all I would say with that. Ravi?
There's Micah also.
Absolutely.
There's a Micah also that paper which Ravi has experienced.
Right.
I think I have made my mind. मैं दोबारा भी लिखूंगा. I'll write my CAT 2 also.
You should.
Right.
ठीक है. चलो, okay then.
Thank you.